Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
හඳුන්වා දෙන නව Surf Excel දැන් Comfort Premium සුළු සමගින්.
On first at 9 tonight, this Thursday, the 24th of November 2022. Right on track. Sri Lanka is making good progress in discussions with bilateral creditors to obtain financial assurances, says Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe.
If we can get the assurances from our bilateral creditors within next couple of weeks, still we have time. I think either December or January. We are very confident the way that the discussions are going ahead, we will be able to get assurances soon.
Toxic solutions. IMF will not provide Sri Lanka with the desired outcomes, says Greece's former finance minister.
There is a profound difference between pain, which is an investment, and pain, which is a pointless investment into more pain. The IMF has been toxic.
Explain. The Supreme Court calls former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to make submissions over his decision to grant presidential pardon to former MP Duminda Silva.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now in top story for tonight, the former finance minister of Greece, Yanis Varoufakis, said that he believes that seeking aid of the International Monetary Fund will not provide the country with the desired solutions. However, bringing you more news on the other side regarding the monetary policy, the Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says that Sri Lanka is making good progress in the discussions with bilateral creditors to obtain financial assurances. He said Sri Lanka is hopeful of receiving IMF board approval by January next year. Speaking at the Monetary Policy Review today, Dr. Veerasinghe said that the expansion of the central bank's monetary policy base or money printing has drastically reduced in the first 10 months of this year in comparison to the entirety of 2021 due to the tightened monetary policy.
At the Monetary Board meeting yesterday, it was decided to maintain the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate of the central bank at their current levels of 14.5% and 15.5% respectively, after considering the recent and expected developments in the domestic and global economy and macroeconomic projections. The board noted that maintenance of tight monetary policy stance is necessary to contain any demand-driven inflationary pressures in the economy, while helping to further strengthen disinflation expectations, thus enabling to steer headline inflation towards the targeted level of 4 to 6% over the midterm.
The most favorable outcome what we are seeing is the inflation. This certainly is turning around, and even our inflation path, the trend that inflation is coming down is certainly will continue based on our expectations. And also liquidity now situation is easing. Forex market liquidity also situation is much better than what we had seen earlier. Rupee market liquidity is also even better, improving, although it's still deficit.
The initial sort of target by the central bank was that Sri Lanka would have prior financing commitments and possibly IMF commitment by December. It feels like that deadline may be missed. What are your views on that? And where are we on the debt restructuring? Because I believe the last meeting was postponed. So where are we in that process now?
Not that last meeting was postponed. We continue to have engagement with both. First one is to obtain financing assurances from bilateral creditors. That is, we are in the process. We have made very good progress in terms of our discussion. And as you know, there were several meetings with our bilateral creditors. We continue to engage and we have made good progress, and we are making a good progress. And most probably the December target, still too early to say whether we would not be able to, but it will be a bit optimistic for us to be able to meet the December target But if we miss that, probably still we have a time until January, that if we can get the assurances from our bilateral creditors within next couple of weeks, still we have a time. I think either December or January. We are very confident that way that the discussions are going ahead, we would be able to get assurances soon so that IMF can submit their proposal to the board sooner. And there are a lot of stories I see in the media saying that if we miss December, it will be next March. It's completely misleading. IMF, the board meetings every week, at least 3 days with a lot of items in the agenda. I think if we miss December, it's not a big deal. Obviously, we can go to the board in January.
If we are not meeting the December deadline, then we have to manage with whatever the inflows that coming into the country, remittances. How are we faring in that terms, managing our finances?
We have been managing this situation without any kind of significant financial flows from the outside since July. Now, July, August, September, October, now month of November. Almost for 5 months we have been managing this. That's why I see still we can manage this situation. So if you look at the situation that we had in April, May, June, even July, and without all these additional inflows of bridging financing, short-term finance, we had some from ADB World Bank, small amounts, but still we are managing. What's important is to curtail the demand for imports. The monetary policy tightening has worked. As a result, we have been able to manage. I think we can manage continuously. If we had managed for 5 months, and I don't see any reason why we can't manage another couple of months without having a destabilization, without having a shortage of essential, we can manage.
You spoke about money printing. Since you took over, has it reduced?
So I can share the numbers. The reserve money or base money in 2020 increased by 31.6 billion during the whole year. And 2021, reserve money expanded by 341 billion. This is next year. And this year, January to October, reserve money expanded by only 47 billion. So you can see the expansion in terms of annual basis. 2020, 31 billion, 2021, 341 billion, and January to October, only 47 billion. There's a contraction.
Now, the former finance minister of Greece, Yanis Varoufakis, believes that seeking the aid of the International Monetary Fund would not provide Sri Lanka with the desired results. Drawing on experience Greece had with the IMF, the former finance minister stated that the IMF only brought his country senseless pain and no real solutions to its economic crisis. The former finance minister aired his thoughts joining our current affairs program, State of the Nation, with Mahish Johnny.
You tweeted advising Sri Lanka to refrain from going to the IMF. Why is that? And if that's your point of view, what's the best way forward for us?
Pain is unavoidable when you go bankrupt. There's no doubt about that. There are no easy solutions. Anybody who promises the good people of Sri Lanka an easy solution is a charlatan. However, there is a profound difference between pain, which is an investment into future prosperity, and pain, which is a pointless investment into more pain. To use a medical language, when they refer to the IMF's policies, when the IMF comes to a place like Greece, a place like Sri Lanka, a place like Argentina, a place like the United Kingdom, don't forget that the United Kingdom sought the help of the IMF in 1976. The standard argument is that the IMF is like the doctor who comes to deliver a bitter medicine, which nevertheless is essential for you to recover. Well, if that were the case, I would be all for embracing the assistance, in inverted commas, of the IMF. Bitter medicine sometimes is essential for recovery, for a cure, right? But if you look at what the IMF did to South Korea in 1998, to a score of African countries in the 1970s, to my country between 2010 and 2015, 2016, 2018.
If I'm not mistaken, the IMF apologized for wrong policy movement in your country.
They did. And I have spoken to many good people in the IMF who have acknowledged that in every one of those countries that I mentioned just now, the IMF has been toxic. So there's a fundamental difference between bitter medicine and a toxic drug that actually kills the patient or makes the patient far worse. I'm very keen that your people do not swallow toxic waste thinking that it was bitter but effective medicine. This is the main concern that I have.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ali Sabri, told Indian Ocean Rim countries that Sri Lanka is poised and well positioned to become one of the major trading hubs of the Indian Ocean. He stressed that Sri Lanka's commitment for matters that concern the Indian Ocean region remain one of the key cornerstones of the seventh country's current economic and foreign policy. Minister of Foreign Affairs Ali Sabri attended the 22nd meeting of the Council of Ministers of the 23-member Indian Ocean Rim Association held in Dhaka, Bangladesh, on the theme Harnessing the Opportunities of the Indian Ocean Sustainably for Inclusive Development. Speaking during the event, the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister highlighted the significance and need of actively engaging with countries of the Indian Ocean Rim to mutually advance economic and commercial interests of Sri Lanka, as well as to maintain peace and stability in the region of the Indian Ocean. He further stressed that Sri Lanka's commitment for the matters that concern the Indian Ocean region remain a key cornerstone of Sri Lanka's current economic and foreign policy. The minister highlighted that the island is strategically positioned at the centre of one of the busiest sea lanes of the world. He also added that Sri Lanka's traditional and ancient links with the countries of the Indian Ocean Rim Association go back to many centuries, and that Sri Lanka's geographical centrality markedly facilitated and aided maritime commerce and trade over the centuries. The minister articulated that Sri Lanka has demonstrated manifestly significant openness to trade and commerce, and that Sri Lanka is well positioned to be one of the major trading hubs of the Indian Ocean. Minister Sabri praised the member states of the Council of Members of the IORA with regards to Sri Lanka's efforts in sustainable and efficacious usage of maritime resources and immense ocean pollution challenges, as well as projects and programs implemented to safeguard the coastal belt and the Indian Ocean. Highlighting Sri Lanka's interests in the IORA and the region, the minister stated that Sri Lanka would be the next chair of the IORA from 2023 to 2025, with a firm conviction to further expand and alleviate the scope and breadth of the organization to be more relevant and more pertinent to the rapidly emerging importance of the Indian Ocean in the current geopolitical and geo-economic scenario. Now in Parliament today, the expenditure head for the Defence Ministry was passed with a majority of 81 votes. 91 members of Parliament voted in favour and 10 voted against it. Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe said that the Sri Lanka Army is committed to protecting the constitution as per the provisions.
13 වෙනි සංශෝධනයේ කේන්ද්‍ර කරගෙන පවතින ආකාරයට බලය බෙදීමට අපි එකඟයි. ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා කියනවා ආයවැයෙන් පසුව විශේෂ සර්වපාක්ෂික සාකච්ඡාවක් තියලා නිදහසට පෙර නිදහස් දිනයට පෙර උතුරු නැගෙනහිර ප්‍රශ්නයේ ගැටලුව පිළිබඳව අවසාන තීන්දුවකට එනවා කිය. ඒ කරන බලය බෙදීමට අපේ පූර්ණ සහයෝගය අපි ලබා දෙනවා. අපේ මේ ව්‍යවස්ථාව අනුව හමුදාවට තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේක ආරක්ෂා කරන්න. මේ රටේ ආණ්ඩු පෙරලන්න එනකොට හමුදාවට පැත්තකට වෙලා ඉන්න බෑ පාරට බැහැලා මේ සෙල්ලම නවත්තන්න ඕනේ. සේවය කරන හැම නිලධාරියෙක්ම එහෙම අවස්ථාවක් වුණොත් ආණ්ඩුව ආරක්ෂා කරන්න ඕනේ. යට ඉන්න කෝපරේල් ඉඳන් උඩහම ඉන්න අපේ ෆීල්ඩ් මාෂල් ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා මේ ආයතනය ආරක්ෂා කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒකයි අපි කරන්න ඉන්නේ.
The PTA, you can tell your international partners that you will not use it, that you're going to repeal it, but they are using it to the hilt. Because we all know with the PTA, there is no justice, there is no law, there is no order. It is completely to be used at the whims and fancies of those who are ruling, the police and the military. The PTA must be repealed and must never be replaced. Because at the hands of undemocratic, selfish robbers that sit opposite, the PTA will always be used for selfish reasons. Today we are debating the Defence Ministry. This ministry is the curse of the Tamil people, Honourable Presiding Member. We have no qualms in saying that we hate this ministry. It is singularly the most hated arm of government that we can think of.
The industry estimates that the information technology industry brings in about $1.7 billion in 2021, brought $1.7 billion in 2021. The central bank estimate is of course lower, it's like 1.1 billion, and other government estimates are there at 1.4, but it's a big one because if you look at it like that, at the moment it's only second to the garments industry. The potential is much higher. They say that maybe by 2024 it can be $3 billion. The potential is very, very high. Therefore, we have to encourage this industry as an export. One of the things that I have said that the government should be discerning about is it has put taxes up to 30%, but I think you should discriminate, particularly where it concerns exports and particularly information communications exports. I think you should be discriminating there because we should be encouraging it.
The Supreme Court today called on former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to make submissions to the court on the 16th of December over his decision to grant former MP Duminda Silva a presidential pardon. The former MP was sentenced to death in 2016 after he was found guilty of MP Bharata Lakshman Premachandra's murder. The Supreme Court has issued a notice on former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to make submissions on the 16th of December over the presidential pardon granted to former MP Duminda Silva. The order was issued when fundamental rights petitions seeking the dismissal of the decision to release the former MP under presidential pardon were taken up today before a two-member Supreme Court bench comprising Justices Murdu Fernando and Yasantha Kodagoda. On the 24th of June 2021, former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa granted a presidential pardon to several prison inmates, including Duminda Silva, in view of the post full moon Poyade. Duminda Silva was jailed in September 2016 after the Colombo High Court found him and several others guilty of the murder of former MP Bharata Lakshman Premachandra. Subsequently, fundamental rights petitions were filed by the victim's wife, Sumana Premachandra, and his daughter Hirunika Premachandra, and a former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, President's Council, Ghazali Hussain, and several others, challenging the special presidential pardon granted to Duminda Silva. Earlier, attorneys of the petitioning party who filed a motion related to the petitions had requested the court to name former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa as a respondent of the petitions. The Supreme Court, which then accepted the request, granted permission to name the former president as a respondent and issued notices on him today. Attorney at law Eraj De Silva, who appeared on behalf of petitioner Sumana Premachandra, mentioned before the court that although the notices were previously sent to the private residence of former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Mirihana, the notices have been returned with a note, acceptance refused. Then the case was ordered to be called on the 16th of December. The petitioners have pointed out that a majority of the judges in the three-member bench of Colombo High Court had sentenced Duminda Silva, who was convicted for the murder of former MP Bharata Lakshman Premachandra, to death, and that it was confirmed by a five-member Supreme Court bench. Further, the petitioners alleged that former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had not followed proper legal provisions when granting the presidential pardon to Duminda Silva. The petitioners have also requested the Supreme Court to issue an order invalidating the presidential pardon. Now, the overseas travel ban imposed on former Central Bank Governor Ajit Nivard Cabral has been extended until the 15th of December. A private plaint filed by former Governor of the Southern Province, Ranjit Kirti Tendakun, was called before the Colombo Magistrates Court this morning. The plaintiff alleges that during his tenure as the Central Bank Governor from 2006 to 2015, Cabral had paid a sum of $6.5 million to Pakistani-American political donor Imad Zubairi without the approval of the cabinet ministers, and thereby was responsible for criminal breach of trust and criminal abuse of funds. He also accused Cabral of causing a loss of $500 million to the government through sovereign bonds due on the 18th of January during his time as the CBSL governor. When the case was taken up by the Colombo Additional Magistrates Harshana Kyakuna Kulavala and the attorneys representing Cabral raised preliminary objections against the proceeding with the matter. Accordingly, attorneys who appealed on behalf of the plaintiff were ordered to present written submissions on the 16th of December regarding the preliminary objections raised by the defense. Now, oil prices fall as the level of a proposed G7 cap on the price of Russian oil, raising doubts of a supply limitation. More news on the other side of this break.
Big 3.
Welcome back. In your business news, the government has relaxed import ban on several items including apparel and clothing accessories, tiles and ceramics, cosmetics and perfumes, air conditioners, freezers and washing machines. State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siamala Pittiya stated that a gazette notification has been published to announce the decision. Accordingly, the import restrictions imposed on these items are relaxed with effect from yesterday. The Sri Lankan shares closed weaker today, bucking a two-session gaining streak after the central bank kept the key monetary rate steady, while investors and market expected some easing in the tight monetary policy stance as inflation has started to decelerate. The all-share price index closed 1.78 percent points lower at 8,028.14 from its highest since the 15th of November hit in the previous session. The more liquid index, S&P SL20, closed 2.19% lower at 2,456.58. The market witnessed a turnover of 1.45 billion rupees, less than half of this year's daily average turnover of 3 billion rupees. The market also saw a foreign outflow of 47 million rupees, blocking an inflow trend in the last 7 straight sessions. The total net foreign inflow stood at 18.3 billion rupees so far for this year. Expo Lanka dragged the market down, losing 4.9% to close at 140.5 rupees a share. Lanka IOC meanwhile fell 4.4% to close at 175.5 rupees, while Haley's lost 5.3% to close at 68.1 rupees. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies in the world. The crash of Bahamas-based cryptocurrency exchange FTX exchange has injected greater urgency into regulating the crypto sector globally. The new chair of global securities watchdog International Organization of Securities Commissions, Jean-Paul Savais, said targeting such conglomerate platforms will be the focus for next year.
Madrid-based IOSCO chair Jean-Paul Savais said regulating crypto platforms could draw on principles from other sectors which handle conflicts of interest, such as at credit rating agencies and compilers of market benchmarks, without having to start from scratch. But the implosion at FTX, which left an estimated 1 million creditors facing losses totaling billions of dollars, will help change that. Savais said the sense of urgency was not the same even 2 or 3 years ago, and there are some dissenting opinions about whether crypto is a real issue at the international level, because some people think that it's still not a material issue and risk. IOSCO, which coordinates rules for G20 countries and others, has already set out principles for regulating stable coins, but now the focus is turning to platforms which trade in them. Savais also said for investor protection reasons, there is a need to provide additional clarity to these crypto markets through targeted guidance in applying IOSCO's principles to crypto assets. He also said they intend to publish consultations report on these matters in the first half of 2023.
The oil prices fell today, hovering around 2-month lows as the level of a proposed G7 cap on the price of Russian oil raised doubts about how much it would limit supply. The bigger-than-expected build in US gasoline inventories and widening COVID-19 controls in China also added to downward pressure on crude prices. Now, Brent crude futures were down 77 cents to $84.64 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 36 cents to $77.58. Both benchmarks plunged more than 3% on Wednesday on news the planned price cap on Russia could be above the current market level. The G7 group of nations is looking at a cap on Russian seaborne oil at $65 to $70 a barrel, though European Union governments have yet to agree on a price. A higher price cap could make it attractive for Russia to continue to sell its oil, reducing the risk of a supply shortage in global oil markets. And that concludes tonight's edition of First at 9. Join us again tomorrow at the very same time for the very latest news. Until then, visit our website www.AdaDerana.lk. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.